Welcome back, everybody, to the Below Average Joe's MMA show preview edition. And Dominic, it is a special edition
Mm.
because it is a finale,
Mm.
season finale, the end of the chapter. It was written.
Yeah.
Of my time in Indiana. It has come to an end. As you all are seeing this, I am making the last preparations for the trip from Indiana to Ohio.
Mm.
I mean, Dominic, this is basically the Oregon Trail I'm going on. This is going to be a torrential trip. The long 290 miles or so between destinations.
Yeah.
Will I make it? I don't know. This could be my last episode ever. If you guys can't tell, this might be something for closing statements. I hate moving. I think I said this when I moved here and we did our first episode, but I just a chance to reiterate how much I hate moving. There is nothing worse than moving in this world. I kind of thought of a joke in my own head as I was saying it, but I'm like, no, I can't give the haters fuel to talk about me. But it's not fun, man. It just sucks. But I'm excited for where I'm moving to. It should be nice once I'm all settled in. But let me tell you, Dominic, actually a little sneak preview, because I know we don't know for sure when you and the fellas might be making a trip up. So I'm renting my furniture right through a company that is partnered with the company I work for. You get like a little discount for working at this company, right? Well, you put in like how much square feet your apartment is, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, blah, blah, blah. And then you can put in what kind of style you want. So do you want something that's more comfort based or something with a little more pizzazz, a little more style to it? Cost a little extra, So to me, I'm more about plain and comfort. Like I'm not looking for something that's you're gonna see on a magazine. Like just give me some comfy furniture and I'll be fine. It's for like a year, right? So then my dad actually went to the new apartment to have the furniture moved in, and he was sending me pictures of it. Dominic, this is some of the ugliest furniture I've ever seen in my life.
Oh no! Oh no!
I'm gonna send you. I'm gonna send you a picture of the couch, and you can put it on the screen. I'm assuming. But when I say, I mean this is the Infinity Gauntlet from the Avengers, like Thanos.
Yeah.
That's what this couch looks like. It's got all the Infinity Stones on it. There's like all these different color, like across the back. There's all these different color, like I don't even know what to call them, but they're just. It's like a gray couch, and then you got all these little different color, whatever,
like beads.
Across the back. I don't know if beads is the right word, but or buttons or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I looked at this and I said, "What the fuck is this?" And then my two chairs, pictures of the chairs probably going to be on the screen as well. Like, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel like me. My mom said, I feel like they designed this for like a woman. Like it seems like furniture that for more of a young lady.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I guess so. But I don't even think women would like this couch.
Yeah.
So
nobody.
Needless to say, might be doing an exchange here soon because what the shame of it is, I looked at their full catalog at the location that delivered to me and seen what was in that same price range, but just different designs, right? And I could have had a nice brown leather couch and 2 brown leather chairs, and instead I got that.
Yeah.
And Dominic, I love how like post editing you'll know what I'm talking about, but right now you're just like no clue.
It's the anticipation for me right now is building.
So that's got to change. I can't be getting flamed by the boys whenever someone comes to visit for my girly looking furniture.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Anyways, long tangent aside, we are here to talk about a little UFC Kansas City, Dominic. Burrowhead, here we come. And I'm just kidding, Chiefs fans. Come on. take it easy.
Mhm.
And PFL 3, a lot of interesting, what do you want to call it? A lot of interesting lineups here on these
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
The actual order is
Mhm.
raising more questions, but the actual fight quality, I expect to be pretty decent here, especially up at the top of both of these cards. Dominic, are you ready to just get right into it?
Let's do it.
UFC Kansas City, headlined by Max Holloway going up against Arnold Allen. Max Holloway sits at a minus 180 as it stands today on Thursday. Arnold Allen plus 155. Now, Max Holloway's his career's in a bit of limbo right now, Dominic.
Mhm.
We last saw him wrapping up his trilogy against the current champion, Alexander Volkanovski, at featherweight. Alexander Volkanovski, of course, has won all 3 fights, and that last one was particularly one-sided compared to the other 2. Meanwhile, Arnold Allen, a bit more under the radar, he was actually in his first main event spot in the fall against Calvin Kattar, a fight he started out great in. Unfortunately, Calvin Kattar goes down with an injury in round 2, so that left a little more questions than it gave answers. Before that, you have to go back to March in London, the famous London card that captured the hearts of so many, where Arnold Allen put on a hellacious beating of Dan Hooker, who was looking to go back down to the weight class he started in the UFC. So, Dominic, this is a very interesting main event. Max Holloway, only 30 or 31 years old, but a guy that feels at least 5 years older than that because he's been in the UFC for so long. He has been in so many wars. He's taken so many significant strikes throughout his career. You know, when is the bottom going to fall off, right? When is that chin going to give in? You know, that's what everybody keeps kind of waiting for. And he keeps surprising us each time out by not just looking good, but looking great, looking like one of the best fighters in the entire company. While Arnold Allen, it seems pretty clear how he is very good, very talented, but he's yet to really show it against the best competition in this division, the best of the best. And now he's literally getting the best guy outside of Alexander Volkanovski as of now. So the question is, the stakes in this fight, Dominic, seem pretty clear for Arnold Allen. This seems like the one thing that's missing from his resume. He has the win streak. He has some very exciting fights. He has some good finishes. But having that real name at featherweight, that real elite name in this division seems to have missed him so far. But what are the stakes for Max Holloway in this fight?
Whew, man, that's such a tough question because I feel like that's been the biggest thing for Max these past couple of years. Granted, he's been fighting, Volkanovski, 3 of them, and then he had a couple obviously good ones with Yair and such. But it's especially after that last fight with Volk, it was like, what does this mean for his career? What will he do next? Like, he's in such lingo. He can win another fight, probably doesn't get a title fight again as long as Volk is the champion. So, I even think we even dabbled in, maybe he finally makes the legitimate jump to 155 potentially. But no, here he is taking on a 10-0 in the UFC, Arnold Allen, by the way, that has just surged and gotten better fight by fight in this company. And I'm telling you, man, the weird thing is, like, if your name at 145 pounds isn't Volkanovski, Max Holloway's beating your ass. The last person to beat Max Holloway at 145 pounds, not named Alexander Volkanovski, was Conor McGregor in 2013, Noah. That is a mind-boggling statistic to think about. So here we are again. Oh, he fought last in July, so it's been a while since we've seen him. Number 2 versus number 4. Traditionally, you would think this is a title eliminator. For Max, it is not. If he wins, he's not going to get a title fight, assuming Volk continues to be the champion. If he loses this fight, even more lingo than what the loss to Volk last year does for him. I think a loss here kind of eliminates any future championship challenging moments for Max at 145 pounds. That may be too brash. Like, again, Volk could always lose, go on a losing streak for all we know, and then Max can find his way back. But I don't see that happening in the next couple of years, at least with Volk being out of the title picture forever. So I think a loss here for Max. I think he goes to lightweight next. But Noah, even a win here, and he's left in the same spot where he's going to have to fight the next guy up in line, whoever that may be to come in after Arnold Allen. So it's a weird one here for Max. It's pretty clear for Arnold. You win, you're in, buddy. Soon as the winner of Volk and Yair, that gets situated, if you beat Max, you're next up. No ifs, no ands, no buts about it. Max, if you win, well, you can just fight the next guy behind Arnold Allen. So if I'm Max, that's a tough kind of pill to swallow here if I'm him. What do you make of this situation, of these circumstances for the former champ?
It's a weird spot to be in for sure. But I actually think I might look at this situation a little different from you on both sides, honestly. Let's start with Max Holloway, though, because that's kind of who I asked about. The best comparison I can think of in my head, just off the top of my head, to what his career right now reminds me of is Rich Franklin after he lost to Anderson Silva the second time, where Rich Franklin was clearly an elite fighter. He was the best fighter in the world, arguably, before Anderson came in the same division and beat him twice. You saw what Rich kind of did after that series of Anderson fights, Dom. He kind of bounced around. He took fights at 185, 205, even had a fight or two at a catch weight of 195. And really what it kind of turned into was you could kind of tell he wasn't necessary. I don't know what in his head he was thinking in terms of like, did he still believe he could earn himself another title shot, maybe at 185 or maybe at 205 or whatever? Maybe Anderson would have lost and then that could open the door for him. But how it comes off to me looking back at it now that it's all kind of transpired, was he essentially turned into like just finding the biggest fight he could get. And, sometimes that would be Vanderlei Silva at, I think that was a catch weight, 195, or Chuck Liddell. He was the man that retired Chuck Liddell at 205. That's sort of where his career went. Now, Max Holloway, it felt like if he was going to do that, that time might have been now, where before taking this Arnold Allen fight, maybe you pursue a fight against a guy like maybe you do a rematch with Dustin Poirier, like someone who also is having a hard time finding a matchup right now. But instead, he's doubled down. He's taken on Arnold Allen, one of the toughest up-and-comers, a guy that not a lot of people would probably be wanting to face in his spot because Arnold Allen doesn't necessarily have a ton of name value, but he's dangerous. And that's a risky recipe when you're a guy like Max Holloway who really needs a win to keep himself at least in the title discussion. So Dominic, I think if he loses, that really is where his career goes. I don't really see – it's not that I don't think he can compete for a featherweight championship again or even potentially make that move to lightweight and compete there. But the odds are not really in his favor because even at 30 or 31 years old, he clearly feels like he is starting to move past the prime, right? You look at the way that Volkanovski trilogy fight went, it does not feel like he is getting better. I'm not saying he's not still elite, still awesome, one of the best boxers in the UFC, all that. But I think it's hard to say right now from what we've seen that he's still getting better. So like you said, Volkanovski loses in July to Yair Rodriguez. That really kind of changes everything, I guess, because obviously Max has a win over Yair. But in my head, if he loses here to Arnold Allen, he sort of turns into that guy that might bounce between divisions. Just
the fun fights.
Fight available. The biggest fight available is a Conor fight become open. If Michael Chandler, maybe a fight with Michael Chandler or Dustin Poirier. I mean, there's a lot of really good fights that he could take at 155 pounds if he made the proper jump up and really made the weight properly. And even at 145, I mean, you could probably think of some pretty good matchups for him there too that maybe don't necessarily affect the current title picture. So I think that's really what's at stake for him, is not that I don't think with the loss he can still compete for a championship, but I do wonder if there might be a bit of a switch in his head where he's like, well, instead of keeping myself out in limbo like this, and trying to take on another guy in this division. Like, I mean, you could imagine him having to fight a guy. If he lost here, imagine him having to fight like who's headlining with Josh Emmett? Ilya Tuporia,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like a
Yeah.
Tuporia or a Movsar Evloev or someone on the way up right now.
Right.
So would you rather take that fight, or would you rather take a fight that's probably a bigger payday and some of those guys at lightweight, or maybe a guy coming up from bantamweight, someone who can maybe make that jump? So it's definitely a lot at stake in some ways, but I also feel like it's could be a bit of an overreaction. Like I'm almost predicting what you're saying, but I look at it as like he would be almost overreacting to the loss here in a way.
Yeah.
But clearly the time is not on his side, and at least it appears, because I mean the damage he has incurred through his career is at a unprecedented level. I mean, this guy is setting records for the amount of strikes he's absorbed. That is not a really good record you want to have if you're going to make another long run in this division. I mean, he's been around for so long already.
Yeah.
And yes, physically, his athleticism, his speed, this should hold up for a few more years. But for a guy who is hittable, it does become a bit of a challenge if he cannot withstand the punishment anymore. So that's what I'll say for that one. But then I also want to kind of address this Arnold Allen portion, where you said with the win, and I think most people are going to be in agreement with you. If Arnold Allen wins here, puts him in the title discussion. Like, if Volkanovski beats Yair, you would think Arnold Allen gets the next shot, right?
Yeah.
If Yair wins, maybe they run that fight back. Maybe Alexandre. I mean, Alexandre still is flirting with wanting to fight Islam again. There is some interesting directions we can go here, and that's why, Dominic, I don't actually think it's like a given that Arnold Allen wins this fight and wins the title shot. And that's going to be
because
my
of
question
who will
for
be
you.
there.
Yeah, and that's kind of my question for you is like, is there a scenario where Arnold Allen wins this fight and doesn't earn a title shot? And actually, let's look at it. Don't even look at like scenario in the sense of, maybe Volkanovski wins and then wants to go back up to lightweight, so then a lot of time, or Yair wins and they have to run it back. Don't necessarily look at it like that. But I mean a scenario where, is there any way Arnold Allen can beat Max Holloway, but it not be in the fashion that earns him a title fight?
I feel like if anybody beats Max Holloway, you should be in. And it's when you add not only just a win over Max Holloway, regardless of how it comes, Arnold Allen would be 11-0 in the company with continued progress up the totem pole in terms of levels of competition. No one else has that right now except for the champion Volkanovski. So I feel like if he wins, it's no longer like it's out of his control. He's done everything. He's there, but now who happens ahead of me? If Yair wins, do they run it back? If Volk wins, does Cejudo jump up if he beats Aljo? Like those types of questions are, yes, worrisome for Arnold. But if he wins here, I would not need to see him touch the octagon again until he's fighting for a championship on the line.
Yeah, I didn't even consider Cejudo. That one threw me for a loop. I forgot about that. He obviously has those kind of aspirations.
Yeah.
But don't forget, Volk wants to go back up to 155 too. He said that. So I will say that for Arnold Allen, one thing that if you look at his career in the UFC, he's not against taking time between fights. I mean, he's done that plenty of times before.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe out of his control, sometimes because he felt like he needed to get better or just took the time to train, whatever, nurse some injuries. He's never been the most active guy. And I think that has hurt his name value at times, but it has helped him probably continue this undefeated streak in the UFC, and has probably only helped him get better and not take the kind of damage that guys like Max Holloway have taken. So I do think that I could see him winning this and sitting out for a while, maybe a year plus, if that's what it took. But I got to be honest, man, I'm just not – something about this does not make me super confident that even with the win, that Arnold Allen could necessarily be just automatically next. Like, I just think there's too many scenarios, and we've thrown them all out there,
Yeah.
that could happen that could prevent him from holding out long enough, like to a point where it's like, okay, you gotta take a fight eventually, right? So,
Yeah.
should it? Yes. Should it be enough? Yes. Max Holloway, you already just said it. Alexander Volkanovski is the only man to beat him in 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you beat Max Holloway, you are clearly in that discussion. I mean, Yair Rodriguez lost to Max Holloway not even 2 years ago, and he is in a title fight with Volkanovski in a lot. It's an awesome fight. I'm excited for it. But it does make me wonder that there's a lot of ways where this could not go Arnold Allen's way, unfortunately.
No, yeah, I see that. There's a ton of scenarios, and Noah, about this fight too in general, it's hard to, as a fan, set your expectations for fight because it feels like no matter what you do, you're always going to be let down depending on kind of how you do it. It's better to go in with no expectations and just let the fight play out. But I can't help but feel that there's something about this matchup, man. This feels like we could be talking about this at the Joey's in December. If this can go tit for tat, 25 minutes for 5 rounds, which I foresee happening, we could be in for a barn burner, a razor thin, close fight. Max Holloway's fight with Yair was incredible, but you felt like Max had won pretty comfortably. I could see this potentially even being more competitive and close than that. How do you have any leans? Do you have any feelings tugging you any certain direction for this fight?
That's a great question because in the way I bet on this fight, I probably do.
Yeah.
I do agree with you that 25 minutes is about what I'm expecting. I don't expect this to be the fight to crack Max. I don't expect this to be the fight to like maybe show that Max is like no longer able to take a punch. I'm not expecting like a quick knockout, anything either way. In terms of what to expect competitively, I mean, my lean is probably that it is a relatively close fight, but I don't know. Like, do I think his fight with Yair could be closer than this one? Yeah, I kind of do. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a Calvin Cater type
Right.
performance for Max Holloway, but it just kind of depends because if you look at these guys statistically, their significant strikes thrown per minute, absorbed per minute. I mean, Max over doubles, I believe, Arnold Allen in significant strikes thrown per minute, also doubles him in strikes absorbed per minute. Arnold Allen, his performance against Dan Hooker is a bit against type for him. Like that was just a very unique showing.
Yeah.
Where he kind of ran through Dan Hooker, threw a lot of wild hooks in that exchange that really had Hooker rocked. But that's not really how Arnold Allen fights. He tends to, I think the best way I can answer this, Dom, you will know how competitive this fight is by who dominates the pace. I mean, if Max is able to be relentless pressure and just relentless volume, Arnold Allen's going to have to replicate that in some sense in order to keep these rounds competitive. Because if he goes down, if he's not able to hurt Max or have those moments, like Marlon Vera did against Rob Font, when Rob Font clearly outstruck Rob Font or Vera in terms of total in each round, but Vera just had those moments where he hurt, knocked down, Font, all that. If Allen can't do that, Holloway's going to build a lead off these significant strikes. But then if Arnold Allen can keep this a more composed pace where Max has to be respectful to power, has to respect that distance control that you would expect Arnold Allen to try to implement, then this gets really interesting when all these rounds could come down to just who lands just one shot better than the other.
Yeah.
So I really think I favor Max Holloway. But it really just depends on whose game plan, whose style dictates the pace of this fight. It really does.
Yeah, this is high stakes, competitive stuff. Do you actually agree with the betting line? We didn't even really. I know you said them, but do you agree with the line? It makes sense, I think, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Do you
Yeah,
think so?
I think so too. I think if Max would have been like minus 200 or something, I think that's a little bit too disrespectful to Arnold. So I feel like this is a good spot. I just wanted to ask that quickly too before we headed on. So
Yeah, Arnold's great, but it is still unproven in some ways. I mean,
right,
his best wins. I don't really look at that. The Calvin Cater fight, he looked great early, but it was one
yeah,
round, and then really early in round two is when that fight ended. Dan Hooker performance was great. The Sadiq Yusuf fight was relatively competitive. He did win, but
mm,
Sadiq Yusuf. You look at where Sadiq. While I know Sadiq's one of your guys, he is good. He's kind of
mm-hmm,
that back half of top 15. He hasn't quite taken the same leap forward as Allen. So
right,
there's still those questions of like, how does Allen do against the best of the division? And it's not like he's fighting like a returning Brian Ortega coming off a very serious injury who's had
mm-hmm,
some losses pile up. No, he's taking on Max freaking Holloway. Like
yep,
he is getting literally the toughest challenge at featherweight outside of Volkanovski. So it would not necessarily, in my opinion, mean a whole lot if Arnold Allen does lose, if it isn't all that competitive. Like, he's
right,
still got plenty of time.
yeah,
Max Holloway's a fucking dog. He is just such a tough guy to really beat.
mm,
And, it'd be a lot to ask out of Arnold Allen to do it when his last fight didn't give him much. Before that was Dan Hooker, who's good, but going down in weight, you know, you get what I'm saying. It's going to be a tough one for him. If he passes it, though, I mean, I'll be super impressed if he's able to win this fight. If he makes it even somewhat to the point where it's like, think of Max Yair, but reverse to where like Arnold's pretty clearly winning the fight. I mean,
mm-hmm,
I'd be blown away.
yeah, I agree for sure. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, so Kansas City, you got a really good main event, and the rest of the card, not too shabby either. Dominic, I'm actually going to take the first one here for the rest of UFC Kansas City. And that's because, a lot of times we'll kind of go co-main, feature
Mm-hmm.
bout. We kind of do that just because a lot of times that's where the biggest fights are, right? Well, no. We are going to the prelims of this card, Dom, because there is only one fight by any measurement that is the second biggest, the second
Yep.
best on this entire card. And that comes in your flyweight division where Brandon Raw Dog Royval takes on Matheus Nicolau. Dominic, this fight has stakes. It means
Mm-hmm.
something in this flyweight division. And also, when has Brandon Royval ever been in a boring fight? And not to mention, Dominic, he's a 2-1 underdog. Matheus
Yeah.
Nicolau is a fucking hammer in this flyweight division. And he's done it so quietly because, unfortunately, if you're not Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo, or Henry Cejudo, you don't get the respect you deserve in this flyweight division.
Yeah.
So that is the second biggest fight here. I think this fight is going to be very eye-opening. I don't want to put the stakes. I don't want to put the pressure on it that like it's going to be what Brandon Royval's basically entire career is, where it's very wild, fun, back and forth. There's a world where Nicolau pretty much controls the entire fight and pretty much dominates his way to a victory. But I expect this to be very high level. I do think the winner of this fight gains a lot from winning this fight, even if its placement might not tell you that. We have a couple big flyweight fights coming up in July that we'll be talking
Yeah.
about. So one of the winner of this fight will surely be getting matched up maybe with one of those four guys, depending on, who wins, who loses, what directions they go. But I just had to give it its shine. It's our co-main of the evening, Dom. War, Raw Dog, but also Matheus Nicolau's cool too.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. This is absolutely the co-main event of the evening. It's bullshit, really. The card order being the way it is doesn't really make much sense to me because this isn't even the prelim headliner, so it just doesn't check any boxes. But the fight is sick, and you said it's going to be high level, and I agree. But I think it's going to be high level with a little sprinkle of fun, Noah, because Raw Dog Royval is a very high level, borderline elite flyweight, but he makes his fights so scrappy, and the wins against him, they don't come easy. Pantoja and Moreno, they had to work for that shit to get those finishes over Raw Dog. And I think, Nicolau coming off of a finish against Matt Schnell, which is great. That's a big finish. So is Raw Dog, funny enough. They're coming off finishing the same fighter. But before that, Nicolau, was on a 3-fight win streak. He had another stint in the UFC a couple years back as well that he had success in. But he had always had that, that aura around him, being that decision fighter, the point-based fighter. We get to see him live in Columbus, kind of the same deal there. Raw Dog is the complete opposite of that narrative. So if Nicolau, like you said, he can come in here and outpoint Brandon, I think that's possible, but I don't think that's what's going to happen, because Brandon is going to just come at him and force Matheus to almost, dare I say, fight Brandon's style of fighting. And that's what I think really intrigues me the most about this, is that if Matheus can get pulled into this dogfight, these deep waters that we really haven't seen him be in, can he still get a win? Can he finish Raw Dog Royval? The stakes are high. Number 4 versus number 5. A win puts them in, title contention here. And, if you want to go off of some fun little patterns of careers, Royval started 2-0 in the UFC, lost 2 in a row, and now he's won 2 in a row. If you're Nicolau, maybe you're looking into that pattern. I'm just kidding, but this is going to be really, really sick. It's not getting the respect it deserves unless you're a hardcore fan. So for those out there that listen or watch us that aren't very hardcore and you're a casual fan, tune into the prelims, watch this fight, enjoy the beauty of the 125-pound division.
Brandon Royval said in an interview with Shaquille Majuri, shout out to him, really good guy, does really good interviews for MMA. He said he believes he has mastered chaos. Now, that very much feels it's a great line, right? Now, I'm not sure if you can actually ever master chaos, but
yeah,
I will say that it was interesting to hear when you kind of look at Royval. His best quality is sometimes his biggest detriment too. That ability to make fights chaotic, how he does seem to thrive a bit in that chaos. He's very opportunistic. He's got great submissions, even got a little bit of stand-up as well. But then also, Dominic, you look at the 2 losses. The Moreno fight, he popped his shoulder out of place. I mean, it's kind of a tough loss. But then with the Pantoja fight, you saw a little more of like where his style can actually be somewhat of a detriment to him, because Pantoja stayed just a little bit more composed, didn't really allow himself to fall into that kind of fight, the fight you're talking about that you want to see him bring to Nicolau here. And that allowed Pantoja to pounce on a second-round submission victory. Royval, in response to this idea, because Majuri, I believe, kind of asked him if there was, any sort of, I don't know, like if he had really thought about maybe calming down his style a bit, like trying to become, I forget how he worded it, but you get my point, trying to become maybe a more composed or a less chaotic fighter. And he would completely double down on it. He believes that's his best way to win. He believes he's the best at it in the entire company, and that's the only way he knows how to fight. And he also he is coming into this fight with a chip on his shoulder. He is not happy about the UFC burying this fight on the prelims. I mean, Royval, almost every fight he's had in the UFC has been a fight of the night or has gotten a performance of the night bonus or something.
Yeah.
And yet, they can't even get a prelim headliner spot. And it's the second biggest fight in terms of stakes for rankings, in terms of the potential fun of the fight. I feel like it's second. So that's why, like, Royval coming in here with the chip on his shoulder, ready to do what he's done time and time again. It's going to be an interesting recipe. I do kind of I want to see what you're pitching. I hope that's what we see. Even if Royval loses, I hope Nicolau really has to work for it and earn it here.
Yes.
And it might say a lot if he's able to remain in his kind of risk averse, more safe style. That might say something about the kind of fighter we're dealing with. But for the fun of it, I kind of hope we see a little bit of chaos here.
Yeah, no, I love that, Noah. And I'm actually I love the co-main. Don't get me wrong, between Edson and Billy Quarantillo, but I'm actually not going to touch that one yet because I want to talk about Pedro Munhoz and Chris Gutierrez, Noah, because I think
Okay.
this is a fun one. This is a great scrap. This is a perfect matchup, I feel like. And I say that because Pedro Munhoz, not on the best of skids, right? 2-fight losing streak. He had the no contest with Sean O'Malley, but was looking damn good in that fight. No, I think he even won the first round. I would think a lot of people would agree with that statement. So he looked good in that one, but we haven't seen him since. That was in July. Gutierrez is on an absolute massacre right now, climbing into now number 13 in the bantamweight division. He retired Frankie Edgar in November, and before that, had a TKO via spinning back fist that we also got to see in Columbus. Shout out to Columbus. It ages, like a fine wine. And now he is taking on another seasoned vet, much like Frankie and Pedro Munhoz. But Pedro, I feel like, has more to offer still in this fight than what Frankie did for Chris. Because if you look at, yes, Pedro doesn't have the best skid right now, lost 4 of his last 5 and no contest. But if you look at the losses, Dominic Cruz, Jose Aldo, Frankie Edgar, Aljamain Sterling. And remember that fight with Frankie? That was one of the first fights we got to preview on this podcast.
Mhm.
Razor thin. I think we may both have thought Pedro won. I think I thought Pedro won.
Mhm.
So very close fight. But again, it's all fantastic names. Gutierrez's name does not hold the weight that a lot of these names do. Aljamain, of course, is even the champion right now. So I still think while it's a good, favorable matchup for Chris, I think that Chris will win. I think we really are going to have to see him dig deep here and put on a really clean, really good performance because, Pedro, again, has fought the best in the world for years and years, never been finished, has 7 losses, all of them by decision. So Chris is going to have to work hard for this one. I think he's going to have to answer a lot of questions. And if he wins this to crack into the top 10, that's big, big time stuff for him, Noah. Give me your thoughts on this matchup.
There is a lot of questions for Chris Gutierrez coming in here. Now, I will admit, I had a bet on Frankie Edgar when he fought Gutierrez, and obviously that was ill-advised considering what happened. But truthfully, I just wasn't all that sure about Gutierrez. You look at the wins before Frankie Edgar, Donna Batcherel is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right either. I apologize, but good fighter. But, if that's your best win, Andre Ewell, he had a draw with Cody Durden. It's kind of like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't sure about the guy. Like, don't get me wrong. I love his leg kicks and I like the power that he carries, but it just seemed like, this might Frankie Edgar, like, even as a washed up version of himself, like, still a guy who's fought the best of the best of who's who. And he ran through him. I mean, completely ran through him. And now, just for argument's sake, anybody who might have looked at when Dom was talking about how Pedro Munhoz lost to Frankie Edgar, let's be clear, that was 2020 Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
Those 2 years made a pretty big difference in the kind of Frankie Edgar that fought Munhoz versus the one that fought Gutierrez. Just in case anybody's kind of wondering, like, wait a minute, you said one was like not that great of a win, but one was a good loss.
Right.
You know what I mean? So time matters in this situation. But Pedro Munhoz is a guy I obviously think very highly of. I think he is kind of a gatekeeper of this division at this point. He is kind of that guy that your first test really for top 10. And I think he thrives well in that role. He tends to surprise us a lot of times with the kind of performances he can put on. Sean O'Malley fight, people could say whatever they want that Sean O'Malley was going to win or whatever. He did go on to beat Peter Yan later that year. But I'm not so sure because from what I saw, that fight went like a round and a half. Munhoz won the entire first round. There's no question he won that first round. And now who knows what would have happened in rounds 2 and 3. You can't count it as a win or a loss. But I think it shows that Munhoz is not a guy that goes out easy against anybody. It's usually a guy who, even in the Aldo loss, the Dominic Cruz loss, like, he remained very competitive in those fights, and those are legends of this division. And then he had that fight against Jimmy Rivera that was awesome. Where he won. Jimmy Rivera, I know, no longer in the UFC, but Jimmy Rivera is a guy who would still be top 15 in this division if he were in the UFC, in my opinion. So There are still questions about Chris Gutierrez, but he answered the initial questions I had for him. The way he ran through Frankie Edgar, it's still a step up fighting Munhoz, being that he's a tough guy to take out. You did make a very good observation about the fact that Munhoz has never been finished. Gutierrez carries a lot of power. He's going to be the bigger guy here. Munhoz is a bit smaller for 135, but Gutierrez only been finished once in his entire that was in the UFC, but that's the only time he's been finished in his entire MMA career. And Dominic, when these guys go to decisions, Munhoz has been in 10 decisions in the UFC. He's only won 3 of them. Meanwhile, out of the 5 decisions that Chris Gutierrez has been in the UFC, he's never lost any of them.
Okay.
One of them was a draw, and then he's got 4 wins. So it's something worth noting that I think a lot of people will look at this matchup like the longer it goes, the more it might favor Pedro Munhoz. But I'm not so sure. I do like that Munhoz, I think, has a much stronger ground game. He's got 8 submissions in his professional career. Chris Gutierrez only has 1, and his only loss is via a second-round submission, or loss via finish. You get my point. So there's definitely ways Munhoz can make this more his fight if he can implement more of a mixed martial arts style game plan where he does mix in the takedowns with the striking. But if he's not able to take Gutierrez down, I have a hard time seeing him win the majority of 15 minutes on the feet against a guy with his power.
I like it, Noah. I like it. Good stats, too. Look at this guy.
You know me. I'm trying to come through for the people. For the people, Dom. I will take on the co-main event because I'm glad you skipped over because I did have a question I wanted to ask you about it. So the co-main event, of course, Edson Barboza at the spry age of 37 years young, taking on Billy Quarantillo, who some people might be surprised to hear is 34. So not a young man's fight here. But obviously, you know me, fight years matter. Edson Barboza, feel like a guy who's maybe on that downward, I don't want to say spiraling, but he does feel like a guy whose best years are behind him. This feels like a fight where it's now or never for Billy Q. Billy Q is a very fun fighter, a very good fighter. But if he's going to be a great fighter, this is the kind of fight he needs to win. Now, Dominic, you look at Edson Barboza, some of his losses really as of late in his entire career, the playbook has sort of been written on how to best set yourself up for a win against Barboza. Bryce Mitchell did it very well. Obviously, Khabib back in the day did it very well. Pressure, you stay in his face, you keep him on the back foot, you wrestle the shit out of him. And if it is standing, you do not allow distance. You keep it close quartered so he's not able to use that very dynamic kicking game that he possesses. My question is, can Billy Q implement that kind of game plan that takes advantage of those weaknesses of Barboza?
I think keeping the fight close and pressure and pace-wise he can. The grappling aspect, I want to say probably not, which I think is like the most glaring weakness in Edson's game, because I still think if it is a close range, high-pace matchup, Edson can still win a fight against someone like Billy Q, and that's just because Edson has fought so much higher level competition. And Billy, this is a big jump for him. I mean, prior to this, his biggest jump was against Shane Burgos, and while the fight was incredible, he did lose that fight. And now Shane's fighting for the PFL tomorrow night. We talk about that in a few minutes. Now he's coming off a win against Hernandez. Alexandre Hernandez got a finish, looked really, really good. And I don't think Edson is like too much of a jump up from Alexandre in terms of like a skill set and what he has left to offer, but it's still definitely a jump up. And I don't know, man. There's just something about Edson's his like array of weapons and those kicks that can come from all angles, high kick, middle to the body, leg kicks. He can do it all. And, you know, Billy's not had to fight a kickboxer of that type of style here. So again, much like Chris Gutierrez, he's going to have to answer a question for us. Billy is going to have to do the same here. And I like you kind of adding that extra bit of pressure when it comes to the storylines, and that being, it feels like, you know, a must win for Billy to make, like, can he put this one run together? Because like you said, he's 34, he's got a decent amount of fights. It feels like if he wins here, this is his chance to build a run and see how far he can take it. If he loses, it's a pretty big setback, and I think it's going to be hard for him to really crack into top 15 the way this division's been kind of moving these past few years. So it's possible in a few of those aspects you pointed out, but if he can't do the grappling, it keeps the door pretty well open for Edson to still win this fight.
If the Edson Barboza that fought Shane Burgos shows up, then I think it's a long night for Billy Q. But how much does Barboza actually have left? That fight I'm talking about has been almost 2 years ago. And when he's 37, he's not a guy that's been at 145 his entire career. I mean, this was a late move in his career to go down to 145 pounds. But, I look at some of Billy Q's recent fights. Like the Burgos fight was awesome, don't get me wrong. But, he lost to Gavin Tucker, who I know Gavin Tucker at one time was a guy a lot of people thought after his knockout loss to Dan Ige, he kind of just disappeared. But he was a guy that some people were pretty high on. But then you look at the wins. Like, to me, Dom, I think it all depends on how much is left of Barboza. But I look at Barboza as a pretty big step up from Hernandez. Alexander Hernandez is just not that guy that I think a lot of people thought he might be. And you look at some of the other ones, Gabriel Benitez, that was an exciting third-round knockout. He had the third-round knockout against Kyle Nelson. I think that one was like 7 seconds into the third round. Billy Q, if he is going to win this fight, does he have to implement those things I just said? No, but that is going to be what gives him the best chance of winning, Dominic. He's got 8 KO TKOs out of his 17 wins. Only one of them have come in the first round. So I don't expect him to get Edson Barboza out of here early, like Justin Gaethje did back when they fought a few years ago. Like, he's going to have to deal with that style of Edson Barboza for at least over 5 minutes of this fight, in my opinion. And if he does, it gets more and more dangerous. If Barboza gets into a flow where he starts attacking the body, attacking the legs, and going for the head, that kind of damage can really add up, considering Billy Q's a pretty hittable guy. That's been probably one of the things you've noticed in a lot of his fights, even the ones he wins. Like, look at that Spike Carlisle fight he had. I know we like our boy Spike, but Spike, if Billy Q is able to beat Edson Barboza, then he is twice the fighter he was when he fought Spike Carlisle.
Yeah.
Because Spike Carlisle, had him on the ropes at times. And, if he can go through Edson freaking Barboza, even at 37 years old, I don't have a lot of confidence in it. But I also don't have a ton of confidence that we're going to get the best version of Edson now. I'm not sure what he has left. So it could be Billy Q finding Edson at the right time, or this can be kind of a big win in name value. But in terms of what Edson has left, it might actually be a bit not much. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I like those talking points, Noah. And for me, again, there are other good prelims on the card, but I wanted to touch on the other main card fight quickly, depending on what you had left for this card as well, between Azamat Murzakanov and Dustin Jacoby. 13 versus 15. Undefeated, Azamat is 2-0 in the UFC, even beat Matheus Scheffel on the Contender Series, has a ton of finishes to his name. Dustin Jacoby flies under that radar, man. He is an incredible kickboxer. He was on a tear, loses the split decision to Khalil Roundtree in October. If I'm not mistaken, probably should have won that one if my memory serves me right.
I had a bet on it. On it. I'm still not happy about it.
Yeah, I thought that was what I was thinking of. And I don't know, man, like that shiny undefeated record is going to be tested here. I don't see Azamat being able to run through Jacoby like he has a lot of his other opponents here, especially if Jacoby keeps this standing, dude. Not a lot of people, especially in this area of the 205-pound division, can keep up with him on the feet. He's just a very technical, intelligent fighter, but does have sneaky power. Like, yeah, he wins a lot of decisions, but if he catches you clean, he can do it. He's finished 2 of his last 4 wins. I just think this fight deserves a little bit of airtime, and that's why I wanted to talk about it just for a second.
Yeah, I find it amazing that these two guys have combined for 17 first-round knockouts in their professional careers. I mean, that's quite a stat. Obviously, Dustin Jacoby comes from a kickboxing background. He actually fought Alex Pereira back in the day in kickboxing.
Oh, wow.
Knocked the fuck out by him. Oof. But Dustin Jacoby is one of the best kickboxers in the UFC. And Azamat, Well, first off, there's been a very funny story going around MMA Twitter about how nobody knows what his age or birthday is. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that.
Like,
Wait a
depending
minute.
on what website you look at, like if you look at Sherdog versus Tapology, I'm pretty sure it's different ages. Like one will say he's
Okay.
36, one will say he's 34, one will say his birthday's in August, one will say it's October or April or
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
The UFC website, I'm pretty sure is different than all. Like I'm pretty sure UFC website says he's 34. I don't know.
Okay.
Who the hell knows? But from what I've seen of him, he's obviously got a good knack for the finish. He's got 2 third-round finishes, 2 third-round KOs, I should say. Devin Clark, Tafon, and Chukwi. The Devin Clark win, probably a little bit better of a win for sure, especially finishing that guy. Because, I mean, Devin Clark, remember when his mouth got all busted up? Was that
Oh,
against Kudalaba?
I think so. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that was like, you see the kind of punishment Devin Clark can take. But that Tafon and Chukwi fight, man, he was not necessarily in the driver's seat to win that fight up until he did. That third round finish came out of nowhere. It was obviously great that he got the finish. He was able to find that finish. But I do kind of wonder how good really is Azamat. I feel like I know Dustin Jacoby's underrated.
Yeah.
I feel like I know that. I don't know how much further. If you're looking at rankings, I'm not sure if he's that underrated. Like, I don't know if he's a top 10 guy. But compared to name value, Dustin Jacoby goes well under the radar for where he should. I mean, I think he's a legit top 15, back half of top 15 guy at light heavyweight. Azamat, I don't know. I don't know that I can say that for him. He's undefeated. He's only got 2 decisions in his entire career. He's a high-level finisher. But nothing I've seen of him up to this point tells me that if this goes into a stand-up war, that he is going to have much of a chance against the high-level kickboxing of Dustin Jacoby.
100%. Couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah, and I think that could be it for this main card. I mean, again, there are fun fights kind of around here that could surprise us for being. I'll just throw a couple, won't touch on them, but just say a couple fights I think could be very fun. I'll start with Lando Venata, Daniel Zellhuber. I think that could be a very fun fight. Lando Venata, always in fun fights. Daniel Zellhuber, very fun striker, but lost his debut despite being a pretty big favorite. Jillian Roberson, Piera Rodriguez is an interesting fight. Jillian, dude, another one that surprised me with her age. Only like 30 years old. Or no, isn't she like 27?
She's really young. Yeah.
Yeah, she's been in the UFC forever. I thought she was like 37. I was like, what the hell? And that's not because of her looks. I'm saying that because she's just been around for so long.
Yeah, fights so
often. I would also, Zach Cummings, by the way, this is his hometown, Kansas City. And he has said this is his retirement fight, taking on Ed Herman, I believe, from season 2 of The Ultimate Fighter. So this fight could be very fun, but also could be very sloppy.
Yep.
And Bill Algeo on this card. I always think Bill Algeo is a fun fight. Clay Guida on this card, legend, taking on Rafa Garcia. Then Tanner Bosser, Jan Kudalava. That fight will probably be fucking nuts because when is Kudalava not in a fight that falls to the wall,
Yeah.
Did I touch on everything? I think I touched on everything.
I think you did.
So we will go into the fight announcements portion of the show now. A lot of UFC talk. That's why we're doing it next, and then we'll get the PFL after. So I think the way you'll see fight announcements moving forward, of course, that we will focus on most of the time, probably actual fight announcements. But as there are discussions about where fighters might be going in upcoming fights or whatever, we'll probably put it in here because sometimes it's hard for me to put those on placing on our episodes. So I think here, any fight talk at all,
it all fits.
That's not a card for the weekend, will probably go in here. So as far as the fights that are actually announced or denounced, unfortunately, Dominic May 6, UFC 288, Jonathan Pearce. I think I called him JPP on our last episode. Jason Pierre-Paul is not who I'm talking about. JSP, Jonathan Pearce, is out against Bryce Mitchell. They are trying to find a replacement. Not sure if they'll be able to do it. Bryce Mitchell, still a very good guy, top 15 fighter. Brandon Moreno taking on Alexandre Pantoja, the rematch. Yeah, I know. They fought on tough. But guys, what does the number say after the fight? says 2.
Yeah.
It's a rematch. So don't
Yeah.
come at me, Jake Branson. But Brandon Moreno taking on Alexandre Pantoja. Moreno with the chance to get that win back. He lost to Pantoja in his first run in the UFC. That, as of now, Dom, is your co-main for July 8th, UFC 290. Unsure if another title fight might be added, but as of now, that is your co-main event. And then another fight for that flyweight division, Dom. It's just a big old flyweight episode today. A lot of people thought after he lost his title in January that 135 pounds would be the next move for old Figgy. But he said, not so fast. Don't forget about me. He is back on July 8th, UFC 290 against Manel Kape. Manel Kape getting that big opportunity. Manel Kape, a guy me and Dom were pretty high on coming in. The former Ryzen champion had a tough start to his UFC career, but now, Dom, he's sort of in the driver's seat to where a win could really open that door for him to potentially be fighting for a title in 2024. What do you think of these fight announcements? We'll get into some of the other stuff, but just as the fights that have been announced, what do you think?
I like all of them. Obviously, it sucks Pearce is out because I actually think him and Bryce Mitchell, that was a sick matchup that people wouldn't have really appreciated going in. So that stinks. Hopefully they can find a replacement for Bryce. What do they got? Like 4 weeks? So there's some time, I guess. Moreno Pantoja. Thank goodness Pantoja is finally getting his shot to fight for the belt. I feel like since the podcast started, we've talked about, well, it's his turn. And then, it's his turn again in 2022 and 2021. So that's going to be a sick fight.
A little thing called a quadrilogy got in the way of that because it was like a few months after our podcast started when the first Figgy Moreno fight happened. I mean, UFC 256. And we're going, this is happening at UFC 290. That's how long Pantoja's had to wait.
That's such a shame, but he's getting the chance. Should be a really, really, really good fight too, I think. Figueiredo Kape, wow, came out of nowhere. Saw the Twitter DM and was like, huh? Manel Kape has been getting back-to-back fights scrapped on fight week or the day of the fight. And now, rather than fighting someone else in the back half of the top 15, someone around number 10, he's jumping into the deep end of the swimming pool against the former champion, Deiveson Figueiredo. Stylistically, wow, what a banger of a fight. There is no shot that that's going to be boring. That is a huge, huge jump for Manel Kape. But if he wins, welcome aboard. There you are, all of a sudden, just like that.
About that fight?
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, we're both very excited for that one. I mean, you can tell by the way we're talking about it. However, I do have to ask, is this the right move for Deiveson? I mean, we all thought he was going to 135, but do you think him sticking it out at 125 is what's best for him?
I think it could be a problem, especially if he loses, because a loss for the title against Moreno, you're still at the top of the division. You're still a top dog. It's so easy to go to 135 and get a top 5 matchup, win that, bam, bantamweight title fight next. Lose here to Manel Kape, that changes the narrative. I think it changes things, because if he loses here, for sure we'll be going up to 135, and then maybe 6 months from now he'll come back to 125 and prove me wrong again. But yeah, I could see a world where this may not be the right decision. For now, I'll kind of just tread lightly. I don't necessarily think I think he really should have went to 135 because he's talked about it for so long. So hopefully he makes the weight. Hopefully he looks good, and the fight could be just electric. Noah, do you think? Were you surprised? You had to have been.
Yeah, so I was very surprised. But then when I thought about it, because I put that question on here at first, because actually, Dom, we were going to talk about Deiveson regardless. I actually had on here, he had done an interview just a couple days ago. I think it was through Sherdog, where he had said, no, actually, I want my next 3 fights to be at flyweight. Like, I'm not moving to bantamweight at this time. Okay. So, not sure why 3 was the number, but it was. And that was going to be originally a talking point on here, but then the fight got announced. So, obviously it got moved on here. So, at first, I was really surprised by it. And then I tried to think about it. Deiveson Figueiredo is 35 years old. Now, we know that stat that came out just a few episodes ago. Fighters in the 170-pound weight class and below, their record in title fights if you were above the age of 34. Not good, unless your name's Tyron Woodley.
Mm-hmm.
So for Deiveson, part of me is like, well, if he moves up 10 pounds, that could extend his career maybe because that cut the 125. I mean, this is a guy who's cutting upwards of a fifth, a quarter of his body weight to make 125 pounds. It is not healthy, obviously, for him to do it. So, in that sense, probably not the best move. But in the sense of what keeps him closest to the title picture, I'm actually not so confident that if he moved to 135, it was one fight, win, and then he gets a title shot. I actually don't think that's the case. Nothing that the UFC has not given me any reason to believe that they would treat even a guy that's as elite as Deiveson at flyweight the same way if he went to bantamweight. Sure, they've given him pretty decent placements on cards as the champion and whatnot, but Dominic, they don't show any respect for these flyweights. If he went up to bantamweight, who called him out? Rob Font. Let's say he fights Rob Font. Let's say he beats Rob Font. He ain't getting a title fight off beating Rob Font. He'd be lucky if he got a title fight after 2 wins at bantamweight. But here at flyweight, if he beats Manel Kape, then let's say if Pantoja beats Moreno, all of a sudden Deiveson's next in line. But if Moreno wins, there could still be that interest to run that fight back a 5th time. I mean, maybe not right away. Maybe he still would have to fight another time after. But, I think for title reasoning, for his place in the title picture, I think it probably is the best choice once I thought about it a little more.
Yeah.
But obviously, his health should come number one. I'm not in his position to make that decision, but it does not come off like it's probably the best decision that way. But
right,
if he can do it and if he keeps putting on awesome performances, then good on him,
Yeah, very true.
There's actually another fight announcement. I'm going to kind of skip around here. How about Dallas, Texas on August 5th?
Yeah.
Our good old buddy Jake Paul will be taking on Nate Diaz.
Wow.
The biggest free agent in MMA, Nate Diaz. He is going to do that boxing fight that we all sort of thought was going to happen when he left the UFC. We figured this was something in the works. But then Jake Paul loses to Tommy Fury, and all of a sudden it felt like that all went away. Then there was talks of Nate Diaz boxing Logan Paul. Apparently, there was even contracts given out for that. Logan was apparently literally at the 11th hour, Nate Diaz's team backed out. And apparently it was so he could get a fight with his brother. So what an interesting little peek behind the curtain that is. You have 2 brothers basically competing on the business side to fight Nate Diaz. And, I don't know how I want to word this question because obviously we've sort of come to grips with this, the YouTube boxing, the Jake Paul's kind of impact on it. We understand it's a big deal, right? People love to watch it. They obviously they're all doing big business. KSI is another YouTuber that does pretty big boxing events over in England. And we've also been saying it's not really our cup of tea. I think we've come over time to be less angry at it, less reactive about it. It's kind of like it just is what it is. Once he beat Anderson Silva, it's like, where can we really go from here? We were defeated.
Yeah.
But now he's boxing Nate Diaz. And Nate Diaz actually had an interesting press release about this fight, Dom. He said that his plan is to beat Jake Paul, who's one of the biggest names in boxing, and then go back and get his title in the UFC.
No shit.
So I thought that was an interesting way to word that because it is, when you look into it, in the wise words of Eddie Bravo, you do kind of notice like Dana never really trashed Nate Diaz when he left the UFC.
No.
That's not, you look at what he's done with Francis Ngannou, he's not really giving him the same level of respect. So I do kind of wonder, though, when I look at this fight, Jake Paul lost in his last one to Tommy Fury. And to me, it kind of like I get why there's a lot of interest still. Big names, right? Jake Paul's very popular or controversial, whatever you want to say. Popular, unpopular. He's a big name. Nate Diaz, big name. So I get why this is going to do big money. It'll probably do 1 million plus pay-per-view buys, if I'm being honest. But part of me also kind of am surprised that this fight got made. Like I sort of wondered if when Jake Paul lost, once he lost, didn't matter who to, doesn't matter that it was to a boxer, whatever. I kind of thought that the well would dry up, but instead of doing that rematch or whatever, he gets the Nate Diaz fight, and it'll probably be the biggest fight he's done. So I think it kind of feels like this is in some form or fashion. It's kind of here to stay, Dom. Now it's just like I don't really know what the stakes are here. You know, like Jake's already lost. I feel like the MMA Jake versus MMA thing sort of dried up. I mean, Jake is literally signed to the PFL at this point and is planning to do a PFL fight. But maybe that's an interesting part of this development. I don't know if you saw the PFL's tweet about the fight announcement, but when Jake signed with the PFL, he said he had offered Nate Diaz a 2-fight deal in boxing, and then they fight inside the PFL Smart Cage for MMA. So I don't know, but based off Nate's press release, that doesn't really seem to be in the cards. I really just don't know what to think of this. Like I understand why it's going to do big business, but I don't really get a ton of the appeal outside of it's Nate Diaz and Jake Paul. Maybe that's all there is to it.
Yeah, that very well could be the case, and we just should not try and overthink it. 2 big names. They're going to box. Should be fun. Definitely came out of left field. Nate's press release is interesting because I just played through a scenario in my head. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, rumored to be in August or September in the fall as well. Let's just say Nate goes in there and beats Jake Paul. Free agent, but he left the UFC with a win. He went outside of the UFC and beats Jake Paul in boxing. Conor, let's say, beats Michael Chandler in the fall. Do we get the trilogy then? And they just clash at the end of the year, or the beginning of 2024. I mean, it sounds kind of fun, but yeah, I don't know. This is interesting. Even I did see the PFL thing. They said like part 1. I think they like quote tweeted it and said something like that. I just never see a world with Nate Diaz being in the PFL, even if it's in the pay-per-view like super fight thing. Can't envision that ever happening. For all I know, maybe he does, but him saying he wants to go get his UFC belt back very strongly leads me to believe he will be back in the UFC following this fight. And if he beats Jake Paul, that's a hell of a lot of momentum, I think, which is kind of crazy for me to say because he's not an MMA fighter, but that's a lot of momentum to talk with Dana and the boys and getting back in the UFC for a couple big fights.
I mean, does it kill it, though, if he loses the Jake Paul?
I don't think it kills it because the Conor trilogy is always there. But let's say there's a world where he loses and Conor loses to Michael Chandler. Then it's all up in flames, I think, potentially. But even if Nate loses to Jake Paul, I could see him being back in the UFC still, I think. I think so.
Yeah, barring, like, if Jake Paul's the one that, like, cracks Nate to, like, really, like, not – I know Nate was knocked out by Josh Thompson, but, like, if Jake Paul knocks out, like, Nate Diaz, that could be very damaging. I don't know. But Nate Diaz has always been a guy where, like, do the losses really affect him usually? Like, what I think would happen is you're probably going to get a fight. Let's say Jake Paul wins by a decision. Nate's going to get on a mic and say he didn't win that fight. I won that fucking fight.
Yeah,
that was a street fight. He only won because of the rounds. Like, it's probably going to be a 6-round or 8-round fight. So he's like, if there were no rounds, I would have beat his motherfucking ass and all this shit. So that's what Nate Diaz does, and he's the best at it. So I don't know what I don't really see anything of harm coming out of this, but I don't really see what I'm sure it's big paydays for both. I get what there is to gain out of it. I'm just surprised that there's as much interest as there is, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised because, I mean, Jake's done a good job of keeping himself like relevant, I guess, because I really thought once that loss came, that well was going to dry up, and it hasn't. He's just a part of the business at this point. Yeah. Also, don't think the PFL MMA fight's going to happen. Actually, Dom, I've been thinking about how they had Biagio Ali Walsh as an amateur on the prelims last week or on the main card. I actually think Biagio's professional MMA debut could come against Jake Paul. What do you think about that?
Oh, wow.
And wouldn't that make sense why they put him on that main card?
That makes sense. Jake Paul they brought him on the broadcast a few times last week, and Jake even talked about Biagio. Biagio boxing background. Who would have thought that, right? Grandpa, kind of big name in the business. Jake Paul into boxing, makes his debut against someone else that's a striker, gives him a fighting chance to win even, maybe. Wow. And they do it probably on a pay-per-view card, I would say.
Yeah. Also, you have the other grandson, Nico Ali Walsh, who's kind of building a name for himself as a professional boxer. He's boxing actually pretty soon. He might be on the undercard of Garcia Davis. I'm not sure. But one of the cards upcoming for boxing, he's like on the undercard. So I heard Jake's wanted to potentially try to get a fight with either of those two guys.
Yeah.
But both those guys don't seem all that interested in it. They kind of think like, and I kind of get what they're saying. They're not being disrespectful. Like they're truthfully like, hey, look, I have no problem with Jake. But they look at it like Nico really wants to be like a legitimate boxer. Biagio wants to be a legitimate MMA fighter. They kind of were saying like, once you do that with Jake, it sort of labels you as something they don't want to be labeled as. Like then you're kind of permanently like in this YouTube boxing scene. Like Tommy Fury, is he ever really, even with that win, is he ever really going to get that credit of being like a real boxer ever? Because it's like he's become a part of that scene that a lot of people look at as like, oh, it's fun, it's entertaining, but it's not real boxing.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. But just some food for thought. Last thing, or no, two more things for this part of the discussion, and I'll kind of group them together just to keep things going. Jon Jones versus Stipe is now being talked about as being highly unlikely for UFC 290. I believe this came from Brett Okamoto, but still a fight that all parties want, but more likely for fall than UFC 290. Yeah. And then Alex Pereira came out and announced that he will be moving to 205 for his next fight. Not to mention that Izzy's coach Eugene Behrman made an appearance on the MMA Hour, said he wants Izzy to fight Jamal Hill for the light heavyweight title in his next fight. So some very interesting chess pieces being moved around here. Obviously, these are two different stories that I just grouped into one. We'll start with Jones-Stipe. Just real quick, is it a big miss to not put them on International Fight Week?
I think it's a huge miss, but am I surprised? Not one bit, to be honest with you. But that sucks. That is.
Can I be honest? I'm actually very surprised. I'm very surprised.
Yeah.
Am I dumb? Am I dumb for getting myself?
No. I mean,
both guys said after the fight, after Jones beat Gon, both of them, it was talk. Literally, they had Stipe interviewed at the end of the fight. They were all saying 290 International Fight Week. I thought it was basically a done deal. Now Dana was very smart to be like, "We'll figure it out. We'll get it a date." He would not come out and say International Fight Week. But I had been operating like this fight is going to happen in July.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest,
be a contract
it's still a
thing.
big fight. It's a massive fight, right? But it's if this fight happens in August or September, I'm not sure if it really still has the necessity for it. And also, the longer we drag this out, whoever the winner of that Pavlovich Blades fight is going to be the poor loser in all of this.
Yeah.
Because, like, a fight like Stipe and Jon, two legends, Jon, pound for pound best in the world. He's the heavyweight champion. He looked great in his first fight at heavyweight. Stipe's a legacy fight, though, because he's the GOAT of UFC heavyweights. But, he hasn't fought since he lost his belt to Ngannou. So, like, it's not exactly a warranted title shot, but it's a big fight. I'm not against it. But it feels like it should be like an International Fight Week headliner. And below that, you have Volkanovski, Yair, and Moreno Pantoja, which don't carry the same name value, but are the far more important fights to the current happenings in today's MMA in terms of just advancing divisions and building legacies. Like Jones and Stipe, they have their legacy cemented. It's really just it's a massive fight, but it's also a bit hollow outside of just the kind of tagline, the headline, GOAT versus GOAT. When you really dig deep, it's like, okay, you're not really getting Stipe in his prime. You can poke holes in it. The longer this gets dragged out, it's like, really, are we going to do this at UFC 292 and Salt Lake City, Utah. Like, I don't know. Come on,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. I feel like this is a type of fight that has to be International Fight Week or MSG. Anything other makes zero sense. And I would imagine that they are trying to save MSG for Connor's return fight potentially against Michael Chandler. So I don't know why they wouldn't want to do this when they both agreed to it. It's still 3 months out. It can't be a training camp thing unless someone got injured and we just don't know. It's got to be some sort of contract dispute, some sort of money dispute, I'd have to imagine. And Noah, this whole 205 pounds with Alex Pereira, not surprised. Kind of expected that to be his next move. Eugene wanting Izzy to fight Jamal, that's all cool and all. But no, I don't think that should be next for Izzy. I think I think Jamal needs to settle the score with Yuri Prohaska first, the man that never lost his title, the man that gave up his title to allow the division to move on. He should fight next. Izzy get another fight in again? Maybe Khamzat Chimaev or Dricus du Plessis. It seems like that fight's getting more and more momentum. Apparently, Dricus, and apparently Dricus had like 8% oxygen in his damn nose, and he just had surgery, so now he can breathe. So who knows? This could be the whole new version of Dricus du Plessis. But Izzy get a fight in against someone, hopefully Khamzat or Dricus. Jamal fight Yuri. And then maybe we'll talk. And in the meantime, Alex can make his debut at 205. I know, was it Volkan Oezdemir, I think, that wanted to call him out for the first one? Fine with that. That'd be a banger. That'd be really fun. Any of those types of guys, I think, is a perfect welcome to Alex at 205. Noah, does Izzy fight Jamal next for the light heavyweight title?
Does he? I'm not hitting a very good batting average on these predictions. I mean, I really thought that trilogy fight, I thought cooler heads would prevail and eventually we'd just get the trilogy bout. So now that Pereira's moving to 205, let me just throw a little fun in here for you, Dom. We got this new company, right? WWE, UFC. They're like roommates under the same house, Vince McMahon's second from the top in charge. What if Vince McMahon comes in to Dana and to Dana White? He goes, "Hey, Dana, here's what we need to do. You have Izzy go up and fight Jamal Hill for the light heavyweight title. Let Pereira fight Volkan Oezdemir, someone he can knock out pretty easily. No offense, Volkan. I'm just saying in this scenario. And I'm not actually saying that's how the fight will go. I'm saying this is what Vince and Dana would be. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, because let Pereira just take a fight that he can handily win. Izzy beat Jamal Hill, then we set up the biggest trilogy maybe of all time. Pereira, Izzy, 205-pound title to settle the score once and for all. Made a best man win at a different weight class. And then Dana White says, "Isn't he fucking awesome?" And that's it.
And then the winner fights Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40. No, I'm just kidding. Noah, that's pretty cool. That's definitely cool. We'll see. But seriously, if he actually goes to 205 next and fights for the title, Izzy, I would genuinely be like so shocked. Very shocked.
I mean, what do you think if you had to predict right here, right now, is Izzy's next fight against Dricus or is it against Khamzat?
Oh shit. I would think it. Oh man, you're such a sly dog. With that question.
Yeah, actually, no, I'm not going to let you get out of this. I want you to answer.
I want Khamzat. That's what I want, especially now that Alex is gone. But I feel like Dricus is more likely to happen. So I would say Dricus. Man, but is he really going to get a title fight next? You know what I mean? No, Izzy's fighting Khamzat. That's the next fight. I'm gonna stick to my guns on that one. Screw it.
This is how fast MMA moves, Dom. I swear, last episode, I'm saying the trilogy's gonna happen. I'm saying Dricus needs one more, but the fight that I want to see is Khamzat Izzy, and I feel like that could maybe happen the headline International Fight Week. That yes, I wouldn't mind seeing Yair and Volk. Like I love that they might be getting the main event spot, but it feels like for that card, you kind of go with a big just legacy fight. And Izzy Hamza kind of has that feeling to it. Some people on TikTok did not agree with me, kind of rude.
Yeah.
But anyways, no. But now I sit here just a few days later. Izzy wants a quick turnaround, from what I've heard. That's what I'm hearing. He wants a quick turnaround. Pereira's going to 205 pounds.
Yeah.
Hamza is apparently going to be fighting Paulo Costa in October, if you are to believe Chael Sonnen.
Okay.
That'd be a cool fight. There's Drickus, Sean Strickland. It's Drickus or Sean Strickland. Like that's
wow.
That'd be I mean, I feel like there's a good chance Drickus gets that fight.
The battle for Africa, Izzy versus Drickus, International Fight Week main event.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the guy who commented on one of our last videos who actually gave me that info about Drickus, because I was trying to be funny, but I really didn't know that about the whole like.
Now I've seen like the articles and stuff about it. Yeah,
it does make sense though. Like it does kind of add up when you look into it. So no, shout out to that guy, because I saw that before I saw Drickus come out and say it, or Drickus' coach come out and say it. Like, so shout out to him. But I mean, I actually think right now, if you made me predict, I would say there's a good chance Izzy Drickus might headline International Fight Week. I still believe there's something to the fact that Volkanovski's on that card and Izzy. Like, I feel like Izzy and Volk, like, they thrive off being on the same cards together. Yeah. They both actually headlined and co-mained last year's International Fight Week. So,
yeah,
it would not surprise me. It would be a quick trip for Eugene Behrman to coach two of his top guys, so.
Wow, I wonder if that's ever happened too. Back-to-back International Fight Week cards, teammates, main and co-main. That's pretty cool, actually. Storyline.
Yeah, it probably hasn't, but yeah. I mean, I guess we can just leave it there for now. I'm sure next episode I'll probably think something completely different. So I don't know.
Same.
Let's talk about PFL 3. God, it took us this long to get the PFL. Jesus Christ. So this card's set up very weird. Dominic, would you like to explain how this card's going down Friday for people in case they want to watch?
Yeah, so what we're doing is 7 p.m. ESPN and ESPN Plus main card, headlined by OAM and Shane Burgos. A couple other good fights. Clay Collard, co-main event. Carlos Leal, one of our boys from the Challenger Series, is also on that part of the card. Delano Taylor at the bottom, I think, starting the main card off. So main card, 7 p.m. At 9:30, it's not post-limbs. It's not another main card. It's the late card. That is according to the graphic on the PFL's page with all the fighters lined up with one another. That is headlined by last year's welterweight champion, Sadibou Sai, and Gerard, I think that's how you say, Al-Salawi.
Gerard Al-Salawi.
Thank you. That's the main event for the late card. That will kick off at 9:30. Magomed Karimov is on that one. Raush Manfios fighting Alexandre Martinez. He was 2021's champion. So good fights, on the main card and the late card. I don't really understand why they did this. Maybe it's like they needed Burgos to be on, main TV, kind of what Noah was saying off recording. So they went with this kind of layout. But I digress. OAM Shane Burgos. That's the people's main event. That's the main event. This is the biggest fight the PFL's done through their first 3 events of the year, Noah.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm with you there. I think this is the biggest fight. I think you said the late card, ESPN Plus, the main card that starts at 7 or 7:30. That's ESPN, the network. So that's probably why they're doing it like that, because that's probably the only time block they could get for ESPN, and they probably didn't want to do the prelims before that. So instead, they're going to start, because typically they start their prelims at 7. So kind of maybe that's why it's happening this way. But yeah, this main event, OAM, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, last season's champion, taking on Shane Burgos, the biggest signing the PFL had in their offseason. Now, UFC veterans have not fared well this season, Dominic, in these big fights. We've been getting a lot of them. You had Marlon Moraes and Brendan Loughnane. That didn't go well for Marlon. Thiago Santos lost to last season's light heavyweight champion, Rob Wilkinson. So now Shane Burgos, the last of them. Well, Aspen Ladd didn't do very well. Thanks, Aspen, for nothing. I had a bet on you, but no, I'm just kidding. So, Dominic, Shane Burgos is the last hope for these UFC outcasts, but he is the biggest of them in terms of what I think people believe to be the ceiling, what people believe just the ability of Shane Burgos, the excitement he brings to his fights. But he's going up against OAM. Dominic, this feels like the kind of fight we would see at the championships at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And we very well might get it again if they advance from here. My question is, do you like that the PFL is just like, fuck it, let's give it to him now. Let's try to cash in on this now. Or would you have preferred maybe OAM and Burgos to start off on different sides and kind of maybe obviously a lot could go wrong, but if they both made it to the playoffs and fought each other in the playoffs or in the championships, it could have led to even a bigger fight.
You see that ladder there is enticing because it would be much bigger if they fight through the gauntlet, have a couple finishes in there, have enough points, and then fight each other at the end of the year. But that's no given, man. It's no given. No. So I'm here for it now. I love that they're kicking off the lightweight season with these two fighting each other. These are the two front runners, I feel like. OAM obviously won last year. Burgos now, no guarantee that he runs through because this is at 155, okay? He was a featherweight, obviously, in the UFC. So it was a bit of a shocker when I saw that they had him matched up for light heavyweight. I'll be excited to see how he fills out that frame. He was a big boy for 145, so I think he'll look pretty well here against a lot of these lightweights in terms of size. Stylistically, too, Noah? Well, I guess real quick, or do you agree, do it now or do it later? Sorry, I wanted to see what you say first.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, is the risk worth the reward for doing it later? But also, Dominic, there is a risk by doing it now because if Burgos, let's say, gets dominated by OAM here, then, I mean, look at what happened with Thiago when he fought Wilkinson. I personally was still very excited at the idea of Thiago Santos in the PFL. Not sure how other people were feeling. But then the way that fight kind of went, Thiago just, didn't look all that great. It kind of makes me go, oh, well, that's kind of done. And for all I know, Thiago's going to go out there and dominate his next fight and then go to the playoffs and even maybe meet up again with Wilkinson in the championships. But with Burgos, I do think there's a risk. OAM, these are complete opposite styles.
I mean, OAM, thank you. Now we'll get into that.
Heavy, great wrestler. Burgos does it on the feet. Great power, great striking. So there is a risk that OAM could kind of control the majority of these 15 minutes and Burgos not really get the show a whole lot. Do I think that's what's going to happen? Optimistically, I'm going to say no. I think this fight will go for at least the majority of the 15 minutes. OAM, 5 losses, all by decision, never been finished. Burgos only been finished twice in his entire MMA career. Dominic, those were against other heavy hitters. OAM's not going to be the guy to knock him out, I don't believe. So with that being said, it's a massive fight. I get why you do it now, but I think no matter if you wait, if you do it now, it's risky, but I'm here for it. I'm here for them doing it now. Really try to get – because it does feel like these first couple weeks of the PFL, some of the steam that they built last season feel like it's wore off a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Kind of is, we had enshrined them as the second best MMA promotion, and while I'm not ready to say that is not true at this point, or our second favorite, I should say. But right now, it does feel like these first couple of weeks have been kind of – last week was fine, but like the card didn't have a whole lot. It was 2 of the weaker divisions in this company. The first week had a great card, just didn't deliver. Yeah. This week, this is the week, you have a big fight that a lot of people are going to pay attention to in this community. Hopefully, and these are probably the 2 best divisions, 2 of the best divisions. I mean, you look at the amount of high-level fights on here, guys that have been champions here before, guys that have done really well in the PFL and elsewhere. Yeah. This is the card that really show that they are still building this into a legit, long-standing promotion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And you're so right about the styles too, man. Because even for Shane, like, he's never even really fought someone as, heavy, aggressive with the grappling and wrestling as OAM. And OAM has definitely fought guys that have power and striking like Shane. So OAM is kind of seen a little bit, maybe has a little bit more to expect in this. For Shane, this is kind of new territory for him. Add that on top of the pressure of being, one of the biggest free agent signings of 2022, or the end of 2022 going into this year, obviously. The biggest name that the PFL, I think, signed, because I was more excited for Shane than I was like Tiago and for Aspen. Like, it's great that they got them there. Shane was a big surprise, a guy that was still in his prime with a ton of potential. So now you're putting him with your former champion. I don't know, too, because like even OAM last year, I know he grappled and dominated everyone en route to the finals, but then knocked out Stevie Ray. So he's got some secret juice in the hands too that we don't get to see that all that often. Shane can be hit. Maybe OAM to set up the takedown, lands a big one against Shane, gets him wobbly. Then all of a sudden it gets really interesting. I just think this is going to be really fun. It's high implications. I feel like no way we go 3 straight weeks with kind of just being left with kind of blah, right? I feel like that's the best way to describe the first 2 weeks. Like the first week was just not that good in terms of the action. Last week was okay, but like Noah said, the names weren't all that great. The 2 divisions aren't the best. This week, it's kind of the middle. We have 2 solid divisions, lots of solid names, and I just feel like the way that they did these matchups, we're going to have that good week for the PFL to go into the second part of the season in June.
Yeah, and it needs it because we need this momentum to pick up again. Because last season, I thought they did such a good job of, building it. And then the off season, signing guys like Burgos and Santos felt like big deals. I don't want to see it lose steam. I really don't. Because now you're talking about launching a PFL pay-per-view division or whatever, PFL or pay-per-view super fight division. You signed Jake Paul. Even though Jake Paul did lose after that signing, kind of makes you wonder how much intrigue is there for. But then you see he just signed a fight with Nate Diaz. So, a lot of big things in the works. I need some more. I want more momentum for this season format because this is kind of their bread and butter. I think it opens up more possibilities, like really going in hard on that pay-per-view super fight division or whatever, because that's when you're going to see someone like Kayla Harrison.
Yep.
Who that's kind of a big hole in this whole season so far is Kayla Harrison's not here.
Yep, exactly.
As far as the rest of this card, I mean, we probably could talk about OAM Burgos even more. It's an awesome fight, but really, that's all that's left to be said. Complete style clash, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's going to tell us a lot about whoever wins that front runner for the whole season. I mean, that's pretty clear.
I agree. Yeah.
So now for the rest of 2023 PFL 3, I kind of wish that they would. I know that's how they do it. They restart their numbers, but man, it does kind of get a little like, I don't know. I kind of calling it PFL 3 every year. It's like, come on, can we get something to differentiate it or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways, a lot of good fights on here. A lot of names that stick out, guys that have had big impacts before. I think the fight that I'm probably most excited for, Dom, if you go down this, whether it's the main card or the late card or whatever, truthfully, probably going to be Rosh Manfio, Alex Martinez.
Yep, that's the one I was
These
thinking.
are 2 guys, Rosh Manfio, 2021, right? 2021 champion, kind of came out of nowhere and did it, had that big upset against Anthony Pettis. And then last season, he was off to a good start again, but Dominic, he did lose to OAM. And Alex Martinez, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere last season and did very well for himself, got wins over Stevie Ray and Clay Collard. But then he, too, had his hopes for $1 million ended at the hands of OAM. So these are 2 guys that are right in that kind of top 5 mix for this weight class. And I think they're both capable of putting on really good performances, really fun fights. So I expect this to be very close, very competitive, and very fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely a high-level fight. I'm also looking forward to Magomed Karimov coming back. I want to see if he can kind of finally put it all together. If I'm not mistaken, he was the 2022. He won at the championship, but did he win? Yeah. No, he lost in 2021 to Ray Cooper.
No, he lost. He lost to Ray Cooper.
Yeah. So, and that was Ray Cooper's fucking insane year in 2021 for Ray Cooper. And now he's not even, I don't even know what he's doing now. But anyways, about Magomed, he went 2-0 last year. He beat Delano Taylor. He beat Gleison Tebow. I remember that fight. Was that controversial or something? Was there something weird in that fight? I'm trying to remember if something was a little off with that one with Tebow.
I think you're thinking of Rory. You're thinking of Rory McDonald, Gleison Tebow, I think.
Yep, that's the one. That's the one. So yeah, now back, hopefully a full season for Magomed to get under his belt. The dude's 30-6, man, and he's just a problem. He has a ton of finishes to his name. Now, I don't know much about the opponent here. We've got Ben Egley. It's his PFL debut, and oh boy, is this a tough one for him. But, and I don't get to see the betting odds here in Ohio, but I'd imagine he is a massive dog coming into this. So can he start off his PFL run by having an upset against a former, runner-up in the 2021 season? I think that'd be a big one, but I anticipate Magomed as my favorite for this year. And I say that because Sadibou Sy, he had a good year last year. He won it all. Sadibou, not the most fan-friendly fighter. No, I think that's safe to say, correct?
Well, yeah, and also Delano Taylor was I believe, a late replacement in those playoffs. Yeah. He did knock out Rory McDonald, sent him into retirement. So Sadibou Sy kind of got the finals matchup between him and Delano Taylor didn't quite feel like a finals matchup, if I'm being honest. Mm-hmm. I do just want to say Magomed Karimov, by the way, he's over a -800. So it's very much expected for him to win here. A lot of high expectations on him. And you're partially right. I mean, he did lose in the finals in 2021. Ray Cooper had that awesome knockout in round 3. But Magomed Karimov has been in the mix his entire PFL career. He won the entire thing back in 2018, then was on his way to repeating in 2019, even won his welterweight semifinal fight against Sadibou Sy. But unfortunately, not really sure what happened after that. So, although it says 2019, it might have been 2021. I don't know. But a lot of history with Magomed Karimov in these PFL seasons. And 2018, he won it. Hasn't been able to capture it since, but he still feels like the favorite to do it each year. Last season, I believe it was a lot of injuries that kind of held him back. This year could be the time for him to put it all together and be a 2-time champion, and I'd be all here for that. Mm-hmm. As far as elsewhere on the card, I am pretty excited to see what Magomed Umalatov, I always have a hard time with his name, Umalatov can do. He's taken on Delano Taylor, who did finish up in the final, lost to Sadibou Sy last season. Umalatov's a pretty big favorite. He's undefeated, 12-0, 11 finishes. This guy's an absolute hammer. I think he's a real threat in this season as well. These two weight classes, man, have so much talent in them. I'm so excited to see how these guys do. And sorry if I'm stealing this one from you, Dom, but don't sleep on Carlos Leal. Leal was one of our big surprises from last season.
Got screwed.
He came out, he beat Ray Cooper to third. They tried to keep my man out of the playoffs, but he wouldn't let it happen. Unfortunately, he lost a very close fight with Sadibou Sy in the playoffs. Dominic, a fight that I thought he won, a fight where he actually brought more excitement than usual out of Sadibou Sy, who does tend to be a bit of a clinch-heavy guy, not the most exciting fighter. And I think this could be a year for him to even capitalize on that and build off of it and really put together a full season of being a real player in this division. I mean, truthfully, you look at each fight and you almost feel like there's a guy in here who has that kind of ceiling to win this entire thing. So that's a good problem to have.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm glad you said that because it's the same way with like Stevie Ray and Natan Schultz, because Schultz won in 2019, a very good finisher. Stevie Ray has a ton of submission capabilities. Finished Anthony Pettis even last year. Did he beat Anthony Pettis twice last year, if I remember correctly? Did he not? So I think that could be actually
back-to-back fights. One of them was a submission.
Yeah, I remember the body triangle because it gave me the Dustin Poirier vibes. And Schultz beat Jeremy Stevens last year and even submitted him. So I think there really are fun fights sprinkled throughout the late card and the main card. And I just really, really hope, again, what I said earlier, that it really delivers here as we head into the second slate in June.
With that, Dominic, we are going to move into the below average bet slip. We are in need of a bounce back, Dom. It's been a couple back-to-back rough weeks. Those can add up, especially early in the year like this, although it's not that early. We're 4 months in. But I mean, you sprinkle these little positive weeks here and there, but then unfortunately 1 or 2 bad weeks can just wipe away all that progress. And now all of a sudden we're staring at a pretty big negative number. So with that being said, you are seeing both of our slips on your screen. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of the bets I want to expand on a little bit. Let's start with Royval Nicolau 1.5 rounds minus 125. Look, I said in our discussion of this fight, Brandon Royval believes he has mastered chaos. He's with a chip on his shoulder. He believes he is being looked over by the UFC brass because they have put him and Nicolau so deep on these prelims when this is the second biggest fight of the night, in my opinion. So he's going to come out here looking to put on a show, looking to prove the doubters, the UFC, wrong for doing so. But Matheus Nicolau is a hammer, Dom. Now, he does have a lot of decisions on his resume, but much like you said earlier, I believe that Brandon Royval's style will not allow Matheus Nicolau to simply coast to a win here as a 2-1 favorite. I believe he'll have to earn it. I believe he'll have to dig deep to win it. And I think he'll have to finish it to do it. Under 2.5 rounds, minus 125. I like that bet a lot. And I do have some plays on the main event. Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen. I got over 4.5 rounds at minus 135. I think this is really good value for this. Both these guys go to a lot of decisions. Max Holloway's basically become the king of going 25 minutes. Arnold Allen has been undefeated in the UFC. Could Max run through him here, make it look easy? Maybe. Could Arnold Allen do what he did to Dan Hooker to Max Holloway and run through him? I don't believe it, but also you have to wonder about Max's chin. These are all hypotheticals that could happen. Anything can happen in these fights. But Dominic, the most likely scenario, very highly likely in my opinion, is this fight goes late. It likely goes to a decision. And one of these two guys gets a very big win over the other. Over 4.5 at minus 135. I think that's great. But I also do have Max Holloway as a part of a 2-leg moneyline parlay at plus 139, along with my boy Bill Algeo. TJ Brown's okay. Bill Algeo is inconsistent, but I do think he is, overall, I've liked what I've seen more out of him than TJ Brown. While Max Holloway, could I have taken it as a single? Maybe. But at minus 180 or so, I think when I was doing my plays earlier, it was like minus 190. I felt like a little better about combining this with something to make it a parlay. If it loses, that's fine. But when all my singles, Dom, are a lot of minus money, yes, I did throw out Rafa Garcia by submission. You feel the need to try to balance that with some plus money, especially on the parlays. So that's why I'm doing it. I'm trying to have a balance here of plus money, minus money. Stuff, I feel confident in everything, but you got to have some darts thrown out there. And Rafa Garcia by submission, my biggest dart, going up against Clay Guida. Rafa Garcia's got great submissions. I do have some stats here for you, Dom. So Rafa Garcia has actually 8 submissions in his professional MMA career. Meanwhile, Clay Guida has been submitted 14 times of his 22 losses in his professional MMA career. If you give me Rafa Garcia, who, yes, he's a favorite, do I necessarily love the odds for him money line? No. Clay Guida is a legend, but he's also 41 years old. The most likely way Rafa Garcia wins this fight is with the submission, and I think that's what he'll do. And at plus 300, I think it's one of the best value props you can have. So, Dominic, with that, I'll kick it over to you and let you give your thoughts on a couple plays.
Yeah, I like your balance there, plus and minus money. We're going to combine your good week with my good week because I don't think I've had a good week since 2022, to be quite honest with you. But first one, I did take Pereira Rodriguez money line against Jillian Robertson. I think it's going to be a really good fight, but the better mixed martial artist all around is Pereira. And I believed in her on the Contender Series, but now she's 2-0 in the UFC. Her last one was over Sam Hughes, who honestly is a very tough out for anybody, in my opinion. I mean, just go back to last week when I lost money betting against Sam Hughes. So, and I think even Noah did too. So we learned that the hard way, but I really like Pereira Rodriguez in this spot. She was plus 110 money line to beat Jillian Roberson. I took the battle of the 40-plus-year-olds, Noah, Zach Cummings, Ed Herman, inside the distance, believe it or not, was plus 120. These guys have had a shit ton of fights. Yes, they both had their fair share of decisions, but I think combined, if you put them together activity-wise, the combined number since they've last fought was 5 years. So they've been out of activity for a long time. Now they're going to clash against each other. Noah pointed out earlier quickly in passing that it could be sloppy. If you're giving me 2 40-plus-year-olds looking to retire after this, haven't fought in a long time, and your plus value for the fight to be inside the distance, I'm going to take that one all the time. We don't get that combination a lot, but I love that one there at plus 120. I took Bill Algeo on a money line parlay, much like Noah. I combined him with Chris Gutierrez. Those two together were plus 130. Copy and paste what Noah said about Bill. For Gutierrez, tough spot, but a good spot for him. I just think the momentum is on his side. I think he can get the biggest win of his career and make his way up the ladder at bantamweight over Pedro Munhoz. Next one, Jacoby Murzakanov inside the distance, minus 135. Probably the one I'm most hesitant on of the night. Jacoby, very decision heavy. Murzakanov is not. I think if Murzakanov wins, he can get a finish. Jacoby is tough to finish, however. But I kind of lean with what Noah was saying earlier. Jacoby can keep this standing. I don't think Murzakanov can compete with him over the course of 3 rounds. Jacoby lands a good shot and can win this fight by finish. So I like that one there at minus 135. And then is this the last one? Yeah, this was my last play so far. Probably won't add any more, but maybe I'll get rowdy and we'll see. Bruna, Brazil, minus 155. It's my chalkiest play of the weekend. I obviously do like the 1.55 units to win a whole unit back. That's what I've been doing this year. I just really liked what I saw from her on the Contender. She's going up against Denise Gomes. She lost her debut to Loma Luke Boonmi. It is a good loss for Denise, but I believe that the better fighter in this is Brazil. She got up to like minus 180 on some books, so I took her at minus 155. Hopefully I don't bite the bullet on that one. Those are the plays.
I like them, Dom. Hopefully we can have a good week around here, Dom. Now, the segment we like to call closing statements. Now, I will just say me and Dominic's connection has gotten pretty bad for some reason in the last like 10 minutes of this show. There's probably been a lot of cutting. So I'm actually going to do editor here. Sorry if you're missing out on closing statements, but we gave you guys a nearly 2-hour episode. Please forgive us. We'll come back with a big closing statement on Monday. But my name's Noah Baker. That's Dominic's list 2 of the below average shows, and we'll see you guys on Monday.